Hi guys, I'm here to give a little mock draft for the 2019 NFL mock draft, NFL draft. The draft is still a couple of months away, and this is even before free agency starts. But I'm doing this draft based on my big board and also based on team needs. Obviously, these team needs will change. They will change as free agency proceeds. But a lot of these picks might be similar to what they will be later on because oftentimes free agency, especially if you're signing older players, they might just be stopgaps, and you really need to address the positions long term. So obviously, this is a bit of a diverse channel. I did a NBA video just before on what the Milwaukee Bucks should do. But this video is going to be, I also am a huge fan of the NFL and I'm really into player evaluation. And there's some flaming hot takes here. I mean, I've not seen anyone put Yodny Cajuste even in the top 10. Greg Little, picked third. I think Dexter Lawrence is the top defensive tackle in the draft class. So I'll go into that as we go along. So here's the draftnetwork.com, and it's their mock draft machine, which is beautiful. It is beautiful. I mean, it is a little bit clunky here in the last screen. I mean, I hope you guys can see this, but maybe I can zoom in or something and we can see that's just stuck down the bottom. There's a lot of blank space up here, but I believe these boys put this together kind of recently, but maybe I could give them some feedback regarding that. But yeah, really nice site, and it's really fun just to go through, like really well presented. So basically this mock will be assuming there's no trades. I mean, obviously if you know that Yodny Cajuste is your top player, you're going to be trading down to accumulate more assets. So, if I'm the Cardinals, I'm trading down. Let's say we trade with the Raiders for their 4th pick and their 27th pick, which they might be willing to do if they get rid of Derek Carr and they want to get a guy like Kyler Murray, because quarterbacks are highly valued, which I believe is a bit of an error, considering that pretty much every team has a borderline starting caliber quarterback, I believe. Now, I do have 2 or 3 quarterbacks taken in these. This is a 2-round mock draft, by the way. So I do have a few quarterbacks taken in the first couple of rounds, but I don't actually have a quarterback taken in the first round because I think there's a lot of quarterbacks. So Kyler Murray and Daniel Jones are my top guys. Then there's Tanner Mangum out of BYU, who's ranked 400th by the Draft Network, but I think has extremely good footwork, can escape the pocket very well, and a good enough arm. He dropped off during his college career. I think he did have some mental health issues, which might explain that. But based on the tape alone, I think that he is a starting caliber quarterback already. So I've got him taken in the 2nd round. But yeah, teams might want to move up for the top quarterback because quarterback is so highly valued in the league. But I think if I was a smart team, I'd exploit that. For instance, if I was the Jets, I'd be trading Sam Darnold for a whole bevy of talent. I'd be trading Sam Darnold, Tremaine Johnson's massive contract, and Kelvin Beacham's large contract for a whole plethora of options. The Cowboys might want to look at Darnold. The Broncos might want to look at Darnold. But that's another video for another time, I guess, because I have done a little breakdown of what I think the Jets should do this offseason. But we can talk about that another time. So first of all, we've got the Cardinals taking Yodny Cajuste, the offensive tackle out of West Virginia. Now, he has... So Will Grier was the quarterback, right, for West Virginia. And it's just like the Orlando Brown and Baker Mayfield situation from last year. Baker Mayfield... Orlando Brown allowed 0 sacks, and I believe Yodny Cajuste didn't allow any sacks either. And that allows, guys like Will Grier to have an epic college season. Baker Mayfield obviously won the Heisman last year with Orlando Brown protecting him. Baker Mayfield is a super talented guy. I think Will Grier is a borderline NFL starter. I've got him valued at around $5 million. In my opinion, that's how I organize my big board. I just go, what am I willing to pay you per year? So Yodny Cajuste, projecting Will Greer. He's just very nimble, long arms, requisite size to run block and things like that. And the Cardinals really need offensive line help. Like they need help all across the board, which is why you would trade down so that you can get more talent. But yeah, they get rid of Jared Veldheer. They gave him to the Broncos, and they didn't really replace him with anyone. And Josh Rosen took an absolute pounding. They do have DJ Humphries, who's a pretty good tackle, I think, but they definitely need help on the other side, and Yodny Cajuste does provide that. So for the second pick, we've got Byron Murphy in the 49ers. Now, Akella Witherspoon did have a good year the year before last, but then had a pretty bad one this year. But you really do need 3 cornerbacks anyway. So Richard Sherman's still delivering, but Byron Murphy is, him and Cajuste, I think, are the best players in the whole damn draft. So getting a playmaker, I think he's in the Deion Sanders mold, just shutting down a whole, quarter of the field by himself. He's just that quick, that long. So the 49ers will have a pretty epic defense, I think, if they can get a guy like Murphy. And there are a lot of edge rushers in the middle tier of talent, so they can get an edge rusher later on. So we've got Greg Little here as well, going third to the Jets. Now the Jets have Brandon Shell and Kelvin Beachum at tackle, which are Beacham's on the way down in his career. Brandon Shell can improve; he's still young, but I think they need a long-term option. They do need a guard and a center, actually. So obviously they try and address these in free agency, but they could have Little at left tackle and kick Beachum into guard, for instance, or Shell into guard. But getting this talented of an offensive lineman, Greg Little is a massive human, very nimble still. Just the prototype left tackle. That's why you need him. Oakland Raiders at 4th, taking Dexter Lawrence. I think he's like 350 pounds, but his get off is incredible. Like he's Snacks Harrison all over again, but he's still super young, and like the sky's the limit for him, So, he's going to have to be double teamed on every damn play. So, the Raiders, they had terrible rates of pressure last year. I mean, I expect Arden Key to improve that. So the Raiders will probably have a 3-4 defense, so Dexter Lawrence can anchor the middle. I believe Jonathan Hankins, who's a pretty good defensive tackle, is a free agent. So, just take the best player available anyway, and Dexter Lawrence does fit that bill. The Buccaneers here, they desperately need help in their secondary. Juwan Thornhill out of Virginia, I think, is a guy who can play both free safety and strong safety, but I think he's best as a strong safety, which the Bucs desperately need. He can fly to the ball and make plays and run defense, and he's really good with his turning his hips, and I don't think he's going to be beaten downfield very often. He's just that athletic. So the Giants, they're taking Jeffrey Simmons. Jeffrey Simmons is just like, you look at the dude, he's like completely shredded, and he's still like 310 pounds. He does have a little bit of a red flag because he did beat up a woman in high school, I believe. But, if you have 3 years of a really good track record, I think you can dismiss that. And the Giants, they got rid of Snacks Harrison. They've picked up some pretty good defensive tackles last year in BJ Hill and RJ McIntosh in the draft. So some really underrated guys, but Simmons is so talented here that I think you just really need to take him. So the Jaguars, there's a few options here with the Jags. I don't think you take a Blake Cashman at linebacker because they've already stacked at linebacker. Nate Davis and Connor McGovern I have pretty equal in terms of talent. I think one option was, so basically it was a toss-up between Connor McGovern and Deontay Thompson here. But I think the Jaguars secondary is still strong enough where I think you need to improve the offensive line further. They got Andrew Norwell in free agency last year, and he didn't really live up to his huge paycheck. I didn't really watch too much of him though, so I can't really make a statement on that. I do make some statements based on PFF's grades. But yeah, here's Connor McGovern at 7th. to the Jaguars. Connor McGovern, he's kind of like a Quentin Nelson type, just absolutely huge body, super strong. Like once he latches on with his hands, like it's hard to get free of him. I watched some tape on this guy. He's an absolute beast. And so, the Jaguars run game is going to be insane. So you've got Norwell, Brandon Linder, and Connor McGovern there. They've got some pretty good tackle talent. Like you've got, I think, you got Cam Robinson, who can keep improving. That Jaguars offensive line is going to be absolutely beastly, which I think they desperately need. Let's hope that Leonard Fournette is healthy this year. The Jaguars should probably pick up another running back later on, or maybe just in free agency, just because that run game really disappeared without Fournette. That's what tends to happen. So this pick is flaming hot. Like, no, Blake Cashman is not on no one's radar. I think Dane Brugler of The Athletic, he had Blake Cashman as the 9th best inside linebacker in his rankings, and I think Cashman's the best inside linebacker. But shout out to Dane Brugler for putting Cashman on my radar. I mean, the dude just sideline to sideline. People are talking about him not being that athletic, but I think he's actually extremely athletic. But it's his instincts and his awareness. He obviously watches a hell of a lot of tape. Like the guy, and he sinks his hips in coverage, but he's still like 230 pounds or so. So he's a third down linebacker. The Lions have Jared Davis, but I'm not sure if he's really performing up to his first round billing. They've also got Tahir White. Oh no, the Raiders have got Tahir White. They got another They've got another linebacker who I'd never really heard of, but PFF reckons he's done quite well. But all in all, the Lions just need best talent available. I think their offensive line is set, their quarterback is set, their running back is set. They could go tight end, but TJ Hawkinson's my highest rated tight end, but it would be a huge reach to take him. I don't think he's anywhere near the ballpark of the talent of Blake Cashman. So I think they take Blake Cashman here. The Buffalo Bills, I've never seen an offensive line just be torn apart by general managership so quickly. I mean, Richie Incognito is a little bit crazy, but he was a rock there at left guard. They had Cordy Glenn. They had Dion Dawkins on the other side. Vladimir Dukas, I think is how you pronounce it. He had a good year a couple of years ago. This is the Bills that made the playoffs. I think, with the kind of talent of the Bills had, you've got to go all in on the playoffs the year after that, you've got Lorenzo Alexander, you've got Jerry Hughes, you've got Kyle Williams, you've got all these legendary Bills players. You've got to make another run for it. And what do? They trade away Tyrod Taylor, and then they take Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen's okay, but I think Tyrod Taylor is better than him, and they gave up a huge amount to get Josh Allen as well, and they didn't really get much from the Browns in return for Taylor. So basically I think first step is just improving this offensive line again. Nate Davis has played offensive tackle for Charlotte, but I think he's better suited to guard. He's only about 6'2". It's kind of a similar situation to Isaiah Wynn from last year, who the Patriots took. But I expect Davis to be a really good guard in the NFL. I think he can kick out to outside, but I think guard is his best position. The Broncos are kind of privileged because they've got a hell of a lot of talent. They just need to, I don't know what's going on with them really, but Jared Veld here is a tackle and he is pretty injury prone. Cody Ford can play inside at guard anyway, so I just think you take the best offensive lineman available, and Cody Ford fits the bill there. The Bengals, so a lot of people like Devin White to the Bengals. I have Devin White going to the Bengals in the second round. But I think Deontay Thompson will really help that secondary opposite Jesse Bates, who I think was a really good pickup by the Bengals last year. Sorry, I just got to put this fan on. Thompson can play free safety. He's a bit like Minka Fitzpatrick, his Alabama teammate from last year. He can play free safety. He can play a bit of corner. Just a real Swiss Army knife there, and I think the Bengals can have an extremely good defense. And I think the need for linebacker for the Bengals is a little bit overblown because they actually picked up Malik Jefferson last year, who I think can be an absolutely dominant linebacker. Yeah, I just don't know if he got much of a chance last year. I honestly haven't been keeping track of the Bengals too much, but yeah, Deontay Thompson is the guy. Man, this video is going to take freaking forever. If I keep this up, LJ Scott for going to Green Bay. I think LJ Scott is like a top 5 player in this draft. And I want to do a little bit of a video breakdown of why I think that. No one's really talking about him. He is, a redshirt senior, I think. So he'll be like 22 or 23 when he gets drafted, I believe. If he gets drafted, he might go undrafted, which is a crime because he's literally Le'Veon Bell all over again. There is that Michigan State ties, but LJ Scott is a 3-down back. He can pass protect. You flex him out wide even as a wide receiver, and he is a very patient runner of the ball, and he's a punishing runner of the ball, and he's got some speed to him at the same time. Like, he's one of the best running back prospects. I've only been really focusing on the draft for a couple of years, but I think LJ Scott is one of the best running back prospects in a while. The Packers, they've got Aaron Jones. They've had some well-documented issues with their run game, but Aaron Jones is quite good, but he's more of a speed back, whereas LJ Scott is more of a workhorse back. So I think the Packers take him. I actually have reconsidering. I think LJ Scott could go to the Buccaneers because the Buccaneers really need a good 3-down back. But sort of interchangeable there, either Juwan Thornhill or LJ Scott. So this is an absolute treat. So here's LJ Scott against Michigan. So this is an example of him just making a play out of the backfield, right? Catches the pass, fends off. Okay, so we know he can do this, right? So I'll just move me. All right, so there's the pass protection. He's a very sturdy run protector. He's almost the size of a fullback, so you can really expect that. All right. You can see how speedy he is in accelerating. All right, here he is flex out wide, so this is what he can do. You want to see a little bit more urgency on the route, but here he has some knowledge of route running, so he can run up the field, cut in, cut up, so you just need a really good quarterback to find him there. Here he is running the ball, very patient, just run through that hole. He just does all the little things that make a running back extremely good. So, that's a hot take there, but, I think he's definitely worth it. The Dolphins here, taking Hakeem Butler. Ever since they traded Jarvis Landry, I think they needed a number 1 option at wide receiver. I think Hakeem Butler brings that. He's huge. He's athletic. He's everything he's everything that DK Metcalf is talked up to be. I still have DK Metcalf as being a 1st or 2nd round talent, but Hakeem Butler, I think, is he the best wide receiver in the draft? Yeah, I guess he is. Yeah. You guys need to check out T. Higgins out of Clemson. I think he was only a freshman or something, but that dude's going to be an absolute freak. He's going to be like a Calvin Johnson type in the NFL. Watch some T. Higgins. I would have had him as a top 3 pick, or top 5 pick if he had have declared for the draft. There's a few guys like that, actually. There's David Dow, the safety out of Michigan State. I would have had him as a top 10 pick, but he's going back to school. The Falcons don't have a whole lot of needs. They did let go of Robert Alford, so they might need a corner. So Jojuan, I think that's how you pronounce it, Williams, out of Vanderbilt. He's really tall. He's long. But like in man coverage, like he keeps up with guys. He has them on his hip at all times. I think you can just play him man to man and not really worry about him there. Zone, not that explosive to the ball, so I'm not sure you play him in zone all that often. But yeah, man coverage, as a man coverage guy, I think he's a freak. So good pick up there. So the Redskins, you can talk about picking, like, obviously a guy like Kyler Murray is still on the board, and the Redskins really do need a quarterback. But as I mentioned, I think you can get quarterbacks later on in the draft because, well, this is how I'd be drafting anyway. But Khalil Hodge, he's another linebacker like Blake Cashman who's getting zero hype, but he's also a sideline-to-sideline freak, 3-down linebacker. And the Redskins, I think, really need that. I don't think you can really rely on Reuben Foster being there for you. Mason Foster is getting on a bit. They've got another good linebacker. I forget his name, but Khalil Hodge, I think he can just be a real centerpiece for your defense. Now, the Panthers can go any number of ways here. They need an edge rusher, so Rashawn Gary would fit into their 4-3 scheme perfectly. And they probably need another safety next to Eric Reed and Nasir Adderley. They could go offensive tackle in Andre Dillard because it looks like they might let Darrell Williams go in free agency, which I think is a huge mistake. They've already got one good tackle in Taylor Moton, but I think you need to really keep elite offensive tackles like Darrell Williams. So they could go all there, but really I think the biggest need here is possibly cornerback. And I think Chris Boyd out of Texas is a great cornerback. He's got the size to just jam at the line and the foot speed to keep up with any kind of receiver. And so, the Panthers secondary gets much improvement. I would have actually taken Tyler Biadasz out of Wisconsin, who was a offensive center at this spot, but he's returning to college as well. So, Tyler, you could have gotten big money being picked up in this range, but it's not to be. But I'm really excited for next year's draft. I'll just go through some of the guys who are returning, who I think could have been drafted. So you've got T. Higgins, you've got David Dowell, as I mentioned. Tyler Biadasz is returning. Derek Brown, he's a bit like Dexter Lawrence in that he's a huge nose tackle, but he's just got great get off the line. Raekwon Davis is also returning to Alabama. He might have been a little bit overshadowed by guys, but I think he was still like a first or second round pick. Kaliki Hudson, the linebacker out of Michigan, he's returning. I mean, he might become a starting caliber linebacker in the NFL with that extra experience, but I still would have drafted him in the first or second round. Trey Adams, the tackle out of Washington, is also returning. So all these guys, I think, they'll probably add a few $1 million to their value over next year's draft, just as I thought Byron Murphy could have been drafted in the first round last year, and now he's obviously the second overall pick for me. So, that's pretty exciting for next year. So for the Browns at 17th, so they've got Jarvis Landry at receiver. They've got David Njoku at tight end. Outside of that, I think they need some extra help in terms of offensive weapons. And there's not a whole lot of really good offensive line talent for a little while down my board here. So I think it's a bit of a reach to take a guy like Andre Dillard. So therefore, Jacoby Myers, who's a wide receiver out of NC State, he's not getting much hype, but he's also a bit of a physical freak. Very tall, so that's a good compliment to a guy like Jarvis Landry, who's more of a smaller finesse kind of receiver. But Jacoby Myers there, I think that Browns offense could be wicked. They do need to improve their offensive tackle position, but perhaps they could do that in free agency or a little bit further on in the draft. So this Vikings pick, it's a bit, really the Vikings need a lot of offensive line help, but as I mentioned, there's not a whole lot of guys who can really, really stack up. They could reach for Andre Dillard, but I think Rashawn Gary, especially with Everson Griffin's sort of unreliability, mental health is a serious issue, but they might just keep stacking up that defense, and Rashawn Gary he's my top edge defender just because he has all the physical tools, and people talk about his lack of production, but that can be down to a multitude of things, like what the coach is asking him to do. But Gary can be an absolute game wrecker. He can even rush the passer on the interior on passing downs. He's got a lot of flexibility there. So I think the Vikings will just go with him. The Titans do need a wide receiver. They've got Corey Davis on one side. I think Deebo Samuel would be a great complement on the other. He can be like a Tyreek Hill type player, a gadget player, a lot of sweeps, a lot of screen passes, things like that. But he's a real game breaker, I believe, and the Titans need a lot more help in the playmakers department. The Steelers are taking Nasir Adderley here. Now, this is... so they did take Terrell Edmonds first round last year. I don't think Terrell Edmonds is all that great. No offense to him. I don't think he's really good in coverage because he just doesn't have that great burst or that hip flexibility to turn and keep up with defenders. I think they've got a great free safety in Marcus Allen. I had Marcus Allen as a top 10 player in the draft last year. So they need to give Marcus Allen some reps, but then having him and Nasir Adderley as a duo could be quite freakish, and that it'll bring back that really good Steelers defense. Adderley's like just super quick. I actually have him as like a strong safety who plays up high and really makes plays because he can get to the ball so quickly and stop run plays, but he's also not letting anyone go past him. So he could be a lone high safety as a guy like Marcus Allen, plays more of a Harrison Smith role and lurks around the linebacker spot, blitzes off the edge and things like that. But I think, Nasir Adderley's the best option there. So the Seahawks, this is a bit of an interesting pick, but I think Quinnen Williams is the most talented. It was either Quinnen Williams or Ja'Kai Polite here. I think they've already got a lot of edge help. I mean, Shaquem Griffin, I think, can be a good edge defender. I think that they'll probably bring back Frank Clark. So I think interior defensive line is more of a need here, and Quinnen Williams is the most talented guy on the board. I know people are hyping him up to be as the next Aaron Donald. I don't think he's much of a similar player because he's a bit bigger than Aaron Donald. He does have really good hand usage and he's quite slippery. But the Seahawks can get a really good, not only run stopper, but can really pressure the passer there from the interior defensive line spot. So the Ravens are pretty stacked. Like their offensive line doesn't have any needs. Like they've got some good safeties like Eric Weddle, Tony Jefferson, and they picked up Deshaun Elliott out of Texas last year, who I think is another top 10 guy from last year's draft. But, they might need to look at cornerback. Brandon Carr and Jimmy Smith are getting on a bit. Julian Love, I think, can be an extremely good corner. So I think they'd go with him. Andre Dillard picked up by the Texans. The Texans desperately need some offensive line help. They gave away Dwayne Brown to the Seahawks for a pretty high pick, but I don't think you should be giving away the chief protector of your star quarterback. So they need to pick up an offensive lineman here. Andre Dillard is one of the best players available anyway, so I think that's a no-brainer there. So the Raiders are spoiled for all these picks. I think they gave up too much considering Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper are generational players. But so picking up a Ja'Kai Polite in a replacement is frankly not good enough. But, having this pick here means that they have a lot of good, young, cheap talent. And Ja'Kai Polite, he can fit into that 3-4 scheme. So you've got Maurice Hurst, you've got Ja'Kai Polite, you've got Dexter Lawrence, you've got Arden Key. Like that front seven, like they're not going to have any problems getting to the passer now. Like that is freakish. All right. So the Eagles here. So this is a huge steal for the Eagles in terms of talent because I think Bryce Love is, the second best running back in this class. He's not really talked about like that, but he's been one of the best college running backs for, decades. He's sort of like the Ezekiel Elliott mold, like kind of short, but very sturdy. 3-down back, can make an impact in all running, pass protecting, and receiving. And the Eagles desperately need that. Jay Ajayi is a free agent. Corey Clement, while he had an epic Super Bowl a couple of seasons ago, he hasn't really delivered as a reliable option. They really need that hammer, and Bryce Love, he can be that guy. So I think they really need to improve that running back spot. And Bryce Love is a huge steal for them there. So with the Colts here, so yeah, they don't really. So here's some guys who I have above Nick Bosa. TJ Hawkinson. The Colts don't really need him because they've got Eric Ebron balling out. Damian Harris, they don't really need him because they've got Nyheim Hines, who I think was a great pickup last year, and Marlon Mack. But yeah, basically, they don't need Daniel Jones because obviously they've got what's his name, Andrew Luck. So I think what you have to do is you just have to go with edge defender in Nick Bosa. Now he's hyped up to be the first overall pick. I just don't see that. I think he's got really good hand usage and power and things like that, but I don't think he's that much of a freakish talent to take first overall, in my opinion. I mean, how valuable is a defensive end, even the most elite defensive ends? I mean, yeah, I'm not sure. I have Nick Bosa valued about $6 million a year. I have Joey Bosa valued about $9 million a year, which I don't think is enough to draft him third overall, and I don't think Bosa is worth taking first overall. But, first round grade on Nick Bosa is still fair enough. I don't think that's too flaming hot. But yeah, the Colts do need to get to the quarterback more, so Bosa is going to help with that. So the Raiders here, so they've got Jared Cook becoming a free agent who they might let go, and they might be just going young anyway with all these options. So TJ Hawkinson is probably one of the best players available here, and he can be a great asset there. He's athletic enough to get out and make catches, and he can block quite well. So the Raiders here, Dalton Risner, the offensive lineman, he's played all three offensive line positions, like guard, center, and tackle, out of Kansas State. I think he's an offensive tackle because he's got the measurables for that. And the Chargers desperately need offensive line help. It's kind of like they had one of the best defenses in the league last year, so that got them to the championship game, but they desperately needed offensive line help. So Risner's the pick there. Here's Damien Harris. So basically, I've got a lot of running backs and quarterbacks who are sliding because they're super talented, but teams just don't have a huge need for them, But the Chiefs do need a running back since Kareem Hunt was let go. Damien Harris, I think, out of Alabama, I think he's just like Bryce Love. He's a little bit stronger, not quite as quick, but yeah, very sturdy running back there. I'm not sure why Josh Jacobs out of Alabama is rated higher than Harris. Maybe because he's a bit younger, but Harris, I think, is a far better running back. So we'll just do the first round here because, frankly, this is pretty full on. A lot of talking here, but we'll do the second round later on. So for the Green Bay Packers, so we did have LJ Scott picked 12, but the Packers do need some more secondary help. They've got their cornerbacks in Josh Jackson and what was his name? Josh Jackson and something Alexander as cornerbacks last year, but I think they need to improve the safety position. I think Darnell Savage fits the bill. I think he's I'm not sure he's the guy that you're going to put at single high. I'm not sure he's that fast, but I think he makes the right decisions and he hits hard and he's got a good wingspan to pass protect and he can move his feet extremely well. Now the Rams, they're spoiled for choice because they do have so much talent, but their interior offensive line, they've got John Sullivan aging. So yeah, I think they really need to improve the interior offensive line. Eric McCoy is a really good offensive center there, so I think they go with him. And the Patriots are also spoiled for choice, but I think with Jason McCourty getting on a bit and their secondary, Patrick Chung and Devin McCourty getting on a bit, I think they need to improve their secondary here. So Michael Jackson out of Miami, I think he's a good fit. Actually, I think we can fly through these. Mark McLaurin, no one's talking about him, but I think he can be a pretty good single high safety. And yeah, he's quite quick and can get to the ball. The Cardinals do need that guy since they let Tyrann Mathieu go. So he's the guy. Kelvin, the Colts have a fair few picks for quite a good team, so that's really good for them. And they picked extremely well last year as well. So I think the Chris Ballard, I think, is the GM. I think he's onto something great here in Indiana because I think improving that offensive line is very important. So Kelvin Harmon, the wide receiver. You've got T.Y. Hilton, but he's more of a wide receiver. I think he's just such a good route runner, but I'm not sure he's a guy who can make catches over the middle and take hits against linebackers, whereas Kelvin Harmon is that guy. So you split him out at the X position, and I think that Indiana team can be quite scary. Greedy Williams, so this Raiders team they're full of draft pick. They've got so many draft picks. I think they need to get more secondary help now. So getting Greedy Williams, who is rated as like a top 10 player, I don't really have him that high, but he is quite fast and long, so I think he's got a lot of talent. So I think the Raiders take him there. The Niners, they've got Joe Staley at left tackle, Mike McGlinchey at right tackle, which is all you need. But Joe Staley, he might keep playing for years and years, but it's sensible to still get some backup help for him there. And David Edwards could probably kick inside to guard anyway. And they do need a little bit of help at guard because Josh Garnett seems to be not playing up to his billing as a first or second round pick, I believe it was. The Giants need more offensive line help, so getting Bobby Evans, who's a damn good offensive tackle. That Oklahoma is a factory for elite offensive linemen. But yeah, the Bobby Evans there, opposite Nate Solder. Jaguars. So there was a few options here. Look, I'm not going to comment on the quarterback situation because we don't know what might happen with Blake Bortles. I think Blake Bortles is an okay borderline starting caliber quarterback. I think he can make some short throws. I think he can scramble fairly well. He's tough to bring down. So he's got some solid traits. I mean, his contract is absurd. Like, you're not paying him $20 million a year. So if I was the Jaguars, I'd be trading him as soon as possible. No offense, Blake, but basically the Jaguars. So who did they pick? Who have I got them pick? Gee, they performed badly last year, considering that they made the championship game the year before. But so they got Connor McGovern on the offensive line. I think they can shore up their offense a little bit more with Irv Smith. They don't really have any outstanding players at tight end, so I think Irv Smith is the best option there. So the Buccaneers taking Daniel Jones, who with Kyler Murray is my top-rated quarterback. In fact, I'd give Daniel Jones a little bit of an edge over Kyler Murray just because he's more of a sturdy pocket passer rather than Kyler Murray. Obviously, he's got the outside the pocket ability. Daniel Jones does a bit too, but obviously not like Kyler Murray. But the Buccaneers have so many weapons, so you want a guy who can get the ball to them just a little bit more reliably. And I think this spells the end of the Jameis Winston experiment. I don't rate Winston at all, and he's obviously a detriment to the team in terms of some of the off-field problems. But I think, Jameis, bad decision-making. I'm not sure his arm is that good. His accuracy is that good. So I think you need to bring in a new guy there. So Daniel Jones is the man in Tampa Bay. So the Bills, there's a few. I mean, they don't really need a linebacker because they took Tremaine Edmonds last year, so they've invested a lot in him. I think he was like top 15 pick or something. Wide receiver, I think they're going okay with guys like Zay Jones and things like that. Interior defensive line, they're pretty strong on defense. So I think what you need to do is get a good tight end, and obviously he can protect. He can contribute in run blocking to help LaShawn McCoy and also help Josh Allen, just that big target. So I think no offense, the guy there. The Broncos, as I mentioned, they're pretty talented team. I mean, they've got Josie Jewell, who I think was a great pickup last year, linebacker, but I think they can improve on that with Sione Takitaki, who not many people are talking about, but I think he can be an absolute beast. So here's Devin White now. I don't have him as a top 10 guy. Brett Coleman did a really good breakdown of him. He's a former running back only a couple of years ago, so he's got the physical traits to destroy guys, but often he just doesn't have that nuance that a guy like Blake Cashman, who's obviously like a film guru, or Khalil Hodge have in reading the holes, making the decision, and just going at it and destroying the guy. And good tackling technique, whereas Devin White struggles a little bit in those regards. But I think he's such a great talent that I think you still pick him up at. So the Bengals will still pick him up at linebacker. As I mentioned, I think Malik Jefferson is still a great player, but Devin White can come in and help that unit also. So the lines here, so they've got Kenny Golladay, who had a breakout year. But I think, he's more of a finesse guy. I mean, he's very tall, but he's a little bit lean, so I'm not sure if he can take hits over the middle. Whereas Marquise Brown is like, sure, he's tiny and he hits over the middle might be a kind of a bit of a problem, but he's just so shifty. I'm not sure he'd even allow that to happen. And run after the catch potential is huge. They've also got Marvin Jones. So the lines are going to be stacked at the position here. But there's no one else I'd really take, to be honest. I'd be taking Marquise Brown just to replace Golden Tate. They can have Marquise Brown in the slot. They can have him all over the field, like a Tyreek Hill player. So he can be a real game breaker and help Matt Stafford out in that regard. DK Metcalf, I've seen him mocked to the Raiders at 4th, which I think is not a great idea considering that he doesn't really have that awesome route running ability, but he is a physical freak. And I think the Packers, have they still got Randall Cobb? Even if they do have Randall Cobb, I think his career is on the wane a little bit. I think he can still contribute, and they've obviously got Devontae Adams, who's a great talent, but I think they do need a little bit more wide receiver help, even though they did have Equanimeous St. Brown and the other guy who I'd never really heard of but had a pretty good year. But I think we need to bring in DK Metcalf anyway. Like, it's a bit of a steal there. Christian Wilkins going to the Atlanta Falcons. So they might lose Grady Jarrett in free agency, but they do need more interior defensive line help anyway. So I'm just going to... This is actually Kyler Murray. I made the wrong decision here because I picked Elijah Holyfield because I thought, well, you've got Chris Thompson, who's always injured, but is a great receiving back. And you've got Adrian Peterson, who's 33, 34 years old. So I think you need to bolster the running back position. But then I realized that they've got Darius Geis, who I think was the best running back prospect, even above Saquon Barkley last year. So you don't really need a running back because hopefully Darius Geis is at full strength. He did tear his ACL last year, but I think he's going to, as professional athletes, they tend to bounce back from this sort of stuff. I mean, just look at Adrian Peterson. So therefore, I just want to replace this selection with Kyler Murray because, Alex Smith is out. They don't really have a replacement on their roster at the moment. They might go after a guy like Nick Foles or someone like that. But that's a lot of, as the Draft Network guys said on the Locked In podcast, or their mock draft. Shout out to them. So they had that just like yesterday or something. That's a lot of money to tie into just the quarterback position. So they're paying Alex Smith a hell of a lot of money. So paying Nick Foles, the $10 million a year or whatever that he might expect is a pretty huge commitment. So maybe you just draft the future because Alex Smith is getting on a little bit. So Kyler Murray here at 46 to the Redskins. Good pick up there. So Devin Bush is a bit of a polarizing prospect because I'm not sure he's really big enough to play linebacker. I have him more of as a sort of a Kam Chancellor strong safety, just like Josh Allen. So obviously we haven't seen Josh Allen here. He's mocked to go, 3rd or 2nd, but I don't think he's refined enough as a pass rusher to be that guy. But he is athletic and long enough to play strong safety, just like a Kam Chancellor, right? I've got him going to, where have we got? To the Chargers here. He could also go to the Colts, I feel. He's a top 2, second round talent, I believe. But to say that he's, an elite edge rusher, I think is absurd. He had great production, but I'm not sure Kentucky's playing the toughest teams. That's just my take. But Devin Bush here, at strong safety. So Eric Reed can play single high, and Devin Bush can play, in the box, or he can just fly to the ball and destroy guys because that's what he's good at. Ed Oliver here, I mean, he doesn't have ideal size, but you look at Aaron Donald and he's an interior defender, but he still makes plays, just like Ed Oliver can. He's not 300 pounds. I mean, he might be able to get up to that, but I think the Dolphins do need help there. They've got Davon Godshaw at defensive tackle, but I think they need a bit more help after, and then Darmican Sue was let go. So Ed Oliver, I think, is a great pick up here. The Browns, so they've got Denzel Ward. I'm not sure else who they really have. So DeAndre Baker helping out at cornerback can be huge for them there. Vikings here, Dawson Knox. Kyle Rudolph, I think he's not a free agent, but I think he might be let go because he is being paid a large amount. And the Vikings, Kirk Cousins could use more weapons, so Dawson Knox can be a good guy there. He's quite athletic, can get into the backfield, and he did have a lot of blocking responsibilities with Mississippi just in the last year. And then just after him at quarterback is Jordan Ta'amu. So here's another Polynesian guy who's actually replacing the previous Polynesian guy in Marcus Mariota. There's just a little bit of trivia. I'm not sure why that's important. It's not. But I really rate Ta'amu. I think he's a very solid pocket passer who can escape the pocket and throw on the run. But he can take hits, and he's got a strong arm and makes pretty good decisions. So I think the Titans need to move on from Mariota. I'm not sure he's as reliable. He's had injury histories because he's quite slight. So I think you need to upgrade at the quarterback position. So it's a pretty big call, but I think Ta'amu is picked up there. Cornerback, the Steelers they've got Artie Burns. They picked up Joe Hayden, but I think they need another guy there. Trayvon Mullen, I think, is talented enough to be a borderline starter there. And then also the Eagles, they've had a bit of, they had Darryl Worley, but they let him go. I believe because of off-field problems, or was that the Panthers? I'm not sure. Ronald Darby is a free agent, so they really need a lot of cornerback help. So I think Jamal Dean out of Auburn is a good pickup here. The Texans, there's no real great offensive line talent here. I mean, I would have taken what's his name, Trey Adams out of Washington here, but as we mentioned, he's going back to school. Trey Adams probably would have been picked up earlier anyway. But Amani Hooker is like a jack of all trades. Like, I think he's probably best as a linebacker because he's that big and he's not like insanely fast. But he can cover pretty well, so he's listed as a cornerback here. That Texans are already loaded. Even if they lose Jadeveon Clowney, I think they're still absolutely loaded in their front seven. But Amani Hooker can help out there. And he can help out a guy like Tyrann Mathieu and Justin Reed in the secondary as well. And then the Texans here taking Josh Oliver, the tight end out of San Jose State, who can be a real playmaker. Not so much of a blocker, but a real playmaker. That's from my memory of scouting him. CJ Fedorowicz had to retire because of concussion problems, and Ryan Griffin, I'm not sure if he is a long-term option there, so getting Josh Oliver would be handy. And then the Patriots are also taking a tight end straight after him in Caden Smith. He's more of a blocker, so he's more of a Patriots kind of guy. But he can get out and, make short to intermediate catches. And Rob Gronkowski has had injury problems and is aging a bit, and there's been talk about him retiring for a couple of years now. So I think getting an option there at tight end. And besides, the Patriots like to have a couple of tight ends anyway. Aaron Hernandez and Martellus Bennett being paired with Rob Gronkowski was deadly. So getting Caden Smith would be handy for them too. Philadelphia Eagles taking Bobby Okereke, who is listed as a linebacker. I think he can play sort of on the edge and play a little bit of Sam linebacker. So that versatility could be handy for the Eagles, who like to spice things up a bit. Brandon Graham might be gone in free agency. They do have Michael Bennett. They've got one of my favorite players from last year's draft in Joe Osman, but he's only on the training squad, so I'm not sure if they will actually retain him. If I was any team, I'd be picking up Joe Osman. Look, watch his tape. He was like a leading sack guy last year in college football, and while his competition wasn't like the Ohio State or those premium programs, like Osman has the tape to support him being an elite pass rusher. But Okereke, anyway, Jordan Hicks has had injury problems, so Okereke can provide a bit of depth there. And here, is it Tanner Magnum or Tanner Mangum? Anyway, so basically I don't rate Dak Prescott very much, so I think they need to upgrade the quarterback position. So Tanner Mangum out of BYU, I think, is a good option there. And besides, Dak might expect a large extension at some point because he did have that Pro Bowl year in his first year, but I think, he's just got accuracy problems. He's got decision-making problems. He's got sort of his ability to navigate a pocket problems. I think he can be a pretty good runner, an escape artist, but I think Tanner Mangum, he's also a pretty good escape artist, but I think he's much more sturdier in the pocket. As I talked about just before, I think he lost his starting position at BYU, but that could be because of a multitude of reasons. I mean, I've only watched about 5 minutes of Tanner Mangum, to be honest, but from what I saw, I think he can be a starting caliber quarterback, so that's really good value for the Cowboys there. I'd probably redo this. I'd probably have the Colts taking Josh Allen, because imagine having Malik Hooker, who's a speedster, playing single high, and then having Josh Allen lurk around, the box and even, guarding tight ends or even slot receivers, because Josh Allen is that athletic and long. So I think the Colts should probably take Josh Allen there, but if not, Mac Wilson can be a good complement to Darius Leonard, who's more of a speedy linebacker type, whereas Mac Wilson is more of a thumper. So I think that could be a good complement. And then the Chargers would take, Josh Allen or a guy like Drew Tranquil, like a speedy linebacker there. If we were to redo this, so yeah, I think they need a speedier linebacker. They've got Denzel Perryman, who's huge and a thumper, but I think they could. Thumper's such a cliche, but I think they could use a speedy linebacker there. And yeah, offensive line talent, like